I am Camille, 32 years old, and family meant everything to me until the night of my brother Jackson's tech startup launch party. For 3 years, I had sacrificed everything to put him through college and pay his rent, hoping he would appreciate all I had done. But as I stood there in my carefully chosen outfit, Jackson approached with 2 champagne glasses, smiled for the cameras, then leaned in and whispered words that shattered my world. "You don't belong here." Let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to find out how I pulled the plug on everything he built and let it all burn. The day our parents died changed everything. I was 24, just starting to build my career at a promising marketing firm when the police called about the car accident. Jackson was only 19, about to start his sophomore year at community college. In an instant, I became both sister and parent. The small inheritance our parents left quickly disappeared into the black hole of medical bills and funeral expenses. There was barely anything left when the dust settled. Meanwhile, Jackson received his acceptance letter to a prestigious tech university across the state. It should have been a moment of celebration, but instead it became a moment of harsh reality. "I can't afford this, Cam," he said, sitting at our parents' kitchen table, the acceptance letter clutched in his hand. His eyes were filled with the same desperation I had seen at the funeral. "Everything they saved for my education is gone." I looked at my baby brother, remembering how our parents had always talked about his potential. Jackson was brilliant with computers, could code before he could drive. This opportunity could change his life. "We will figure it out," I promised, though I had no idea how. That night I did the math. Between my modest salary, the rent on my apartment, and my own student loans, there was no way to make it work. But as I stared at photos of our parents on my wall, I made a decision that would alter the course of both our lives. The following week, I gave notice at my apartment complex and found a tiny studio that cost half as much. I sold my car and started taking public transportation. I spoke to my boss about picking up extra projects for additional income and started freelancing on weekends. Every spare dollar went into a joint account I opened for Jackson's education. "This is temporary," I told myself as I boxed up my comfortable life, "just until he graduates and gets on his feet." When Jackson left for university, he hugged me tightly. "I will make you proud, Cam. I promise. Once I graduate, I will take care of you the way you're taking care of me." Those words sustained me through that first difficult year. I declined an opportunity for promotion that would have required travel, knowing I needed to be available if Jackson needed me. I cut out all personal luxuries. No more dinners with friends, no new clothes, no vacations. My refrigerator contained the cheapest groceries I could find, and my social life consisted of video calls with Jackson, hearing about his exciting new world. During that first year, Jackson called often, always expressing gratitude. He would tell me about his classes, his new friends, and how he was being careful with the money I sent. "I got a campus job to help with expenses," he told me proudly during our weekly call. "You're already doing so much." I felt proud then, believing we were in this together, a team just like our parents would have wanted. But something shifted during his sophomore year. The calls became less frequent, and when they did happen, Jackson seemed distracted, impatient. He joined a prestigious tech fraternity and began spending time with students from wealthy families. The first Thanksgiving he brought friends home, I spent days preparing our parents' house, which I had kept instead of selling, wanting Jackson to always have a home to return to. I worked overtime to afford a proper holiday meal, wanting to impress his new friends. That evening, as I was bringing dessert from the kitchen, I overheard Jackson in the living room. "Yeah, this is just my family house," he was saying to a friend who had asked about the modest home. "My sister handles some bills and stuff while I am at school. She's just, regular, works in marketing or whatever." I stood frozen in the hallway, pumpkin pie in hand, as his friend replied, "That's cool, she helps out. My parents cover everything for me." "Yeah," Jackson laughed. "Hopefully I will not need her help much longer. Once I break into tech, I am set." I placed the pie on the dining table with a smile, pretending I had not heard a word. But something cold settled in my stomach that night, a feeling I could not shake. The second year of supporting Jackson brought financial challenges I had not anticipated. He switched his major from computer science to specialized artificial intelligence development, extending his education by 2 years. When he called to tell me, he was bubbling with excitement. "This is where all the opportunities are, Cam. The best jobs, the best connections. I need to be part of this. I swallowed hard before responding. That is 2 more years of tuition, Jackson. Are you sure? I know it is a lot to ask, he said, his voice softening. But this could set me up for life. I could make enough to pay you back 10 times over. How could I say no to that? Our parents would have wanted him to pursue his passion. So I agreed, though it meant dipping into what little savings I had left. Then came the apartment. Jackson insisted he needed to move off campus to a luxury building where many tech entrepreneurs and graduate students lived. It is all about networking, Cam, he explained. The guys who founded the biggest startups in the valley lived together first. This building is where all the connections happen. The rent was 3 times what I had budgeted for his housing. But again, I could not bring myself to be the obstacle between Jackson and success. The expenses continued to mount. High-end laptops, specialized equipment, conference tickets, all essential for his education and networking. Weekend trips with classmates for hackathons mysteriously appeared on our joint account statements, often accompanied by charges from restaurants and bars I could never afford to visit myself. My credit card debt grew to frightening levels. I took on additional freelance projects, often working until 2 or 3 in the morning before getting up for my day job. My boss noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "There is an amazing opportunity with Johnson & Marks," she told me one afternoon. "Senior marketing position, creative control, double your current salary. I recommended you." My heart leapt at the thought. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I had been working toward before our parents died. "Where is the position based?" I asked, already knowing the answer would crush me. "New York," she replied. "They would need you to relocate within the month." I thought of Jackson still with 2 years of school left. I thought of our joint account, which needed my constant attention and replenishment. "I cannot leave right now," I said, watching my dream job slip away. "Family obligations." My boss nodded sympathetically, but I saw the disappointment in her eyes. We both knew these opportunities did not come often. That night I canceled my dentist appointment for the 3rd time. The persistent toothache would have to wait. I simply could not afford the procedure, not with Jackson's tuition payment coming due. On my 29th birthday, I sat alone in my studio apartment. My few remaining friends had invited me out, but I had declined, knowing I could not afford even a modest celebration. Instead, I was reviewing our bank statement, trying to understand how Jackson had withdrawn $800 the previous day, money that had been earmarked for his textbooks. My phone pinged with a notification from Instagram. Jackson had posted photos from South Padre Island, where he was apparently spending spring break with his fraternity brothers. The caption read, "Living my best life." In the photos, he was holding bottles of expensive champagne on a yacht surrounded by smiling friends. I stared at my phone screen until it went dark, then checked our account balance again. After his withdrawal, I would need to use my credit card to cover his upcoming rent payment. I closed my eyes, trying to remember why I was doing this. For our parents, for Jackson's future, for our family. The selfie I took that night and sent to Jackson with the message, "Quiet birthday at home," received a thumbs up emoji 6 hours later. That was my entire birthday celebration. It was during Jackson's senior year that he dropped the bombshell. We were having one of our increasingly rare phone conversations when he casually mentioned he was thinking of dropping out. "Dropping out!" I nearly shouted into the phone. "After all this money and time, Jackson, you are 1 year from graduating." "Cam, listen." His voice took on the patient tone he now often used with me, as if explaining something complex to a child. "The most successful tech founders drop out. Gates, Zuckerberg, Jobs. I have this idea, this amazing idea for an app that will revolutionize how influencers connect with brands. The perfect intersection of social media and marketing." "But your degree?" "A piece of paper," he dismissed. "What matters in tech is your product and your network. I have both. I just need 1 more year of support while I build the prototype. Then investors will be throwing money at me, at us." "Us?" I questioned. "Well, your marketing background could actually be useful," he said. "Not at the executive level, obviously, but maybe helping with promotions or content or something." I should have said no. I should have told him to finish his degree, get a job, and support himself like an adult. But 3 years of saying yes had created a pattern neither of us knew how to break. And somewhere buried beneath my exhaustion and resentment was a small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he really would succeed and remember who had made it all possible. Just one more year, I agreed, already calculating what assets I had left to liquidate. I refinanced my car loan for the third time and took a loan against my meager retirement account to provide Jackson with the initial funding for his business venture. This is it, I told myself as I signed the paperwork. The final sacrifice. I never intended to become so involved in Jackson's startup. It began innocently enough with him asking for my opinion on his business plan. "You have actual experience in the marketing world," he said during one of our rare in-person meetings. "Just look it over and tell me what you think." The business plan was ambitious but disorganized, with significant gaps in the marketing strategy. I spent an entire weekend restructuring it, adding detailed sections on market analysis, target demographics, and engagement strategies. When I sent it back, Jackson seemed genuinely impressed. "This is exactly what I needed," he said. "The potential investors will love this." That initial success led to more requests. Could I help him create a pitch deck? Did I have any contacts in the influencer marketing space? Would I mind reviewing some copy for the website I found myself using my lunch breaks and evenings to support Jackson's vision? I reached out to industry contacts I had cultivated over years, introducing them to my brother with glowing recommendations. I leveraged my agency's resources using our market research tools after hours to provide Jackson with valuable data. When he needed a professional space to meet with potential investors, I covered the rent for an expensive co-working space in the financial district. It was far more than I could afford, but Jackson insisted it was crucial for making the right impression. "Perception is reality in this business, Cam," he explained. "Nobody invests in a startup operating out of someone's garage anymore." The first small investment came after a pitch meeting where Jackson used the presentation I had stayed up 3 nights creating. He called me immediately after, voice breathless with excitement. "They are in $100,000 of seed funding." "This is happening, Cam." I felt a surge of pride and relief. Maybe this would all be worth it. Maybe we were on the verge of something great. The local tech publications began featuring Jackson as an up-and-coming entrepreneur, self-made innovator with revolutionary vision. One headline declared above Jackson's professional headshot, which I had paid for. In an alumni spotlight for his university newsletter, Jackson described his journey as independent and self-directed, claiming he had bootstrapped his company from nothing but his own determination. I read these articles with a strange detachment, as if they were describing someone I did not know. There was never any mention of the sister who had funded his education, paid his rent, created his business materials, and connected him with key industry players. In Jackson's carefully crafted narrative, he had done it all himself. The final straw came when I watched his interview with a popular tech podcast. The host asked about his inspiration and support system. "I have always been self-motivated," Jackson replied smoothly. "When our parents passed away, I knew I had to make my own path. Nobody was going to hand me anything. Every dollar in this company came from my own hustle and determination." I closed my laptop mid-interview, unable to listen to another word. That night, I calculated exactly how much I had contributed to Jackson's education and business: $178,412, not including countless hours of unpaid labor. Every dollar had come from my sacrifice, not his hustle. Yet despite this revelation, I still could not break away. The pattern was too established, the hope still flickering that eventually Jackson would acknowledge my role and make things right. That opportunity seemed to arrive when a major investor expressed interest in Jackson's company, but added one condition: he needed an experienced marketing leader on his executive team. Jackson called me immediately. "This is perfect, Cam. You can join as the marketing director. We finally get to work together officially." For a moment, my heart swelled. Finally, recognition of my value. Then Jackson continued. "The salary would be below market rate, obviously. We are still a startup. But think about it, you would be getting in on the ground floor. And we are family, so I know you understand the need to be flexible." "Would there be equity?" I asked, thinking of the standard compensation packages for executive roles in startups. Jackson hesitated. We need to reserve equity for the major investors and technical talent, but down the road, definitely. I should have walked away then. But after 3 years of supporting Jackson's dream, I felt too invested to abandon it now. I gave notice at my secure job with benefits and joined my brother's startup for a salary that was 60% of what I had been making with no equity and no guarantee. We are going to change the world, Jackson assured me on my first day. And we will do it together. I wanted desperately to believe him. The launch party was scheduled for exactly 1 month after I joined the company officially. As the new marketing director, the responsibility for organizing the event fell to me, though I had been given a budget that could barely cover a child's birthday party, let alone a professional launch event. I called in every favor I had accumulated in my years in the marketing industry. An old colleague who now managed a trendy downtown venue agreed to let us use the space at no cost, provided we held the event on a Monday night. A client whose campaign I had saved at my previous job connected me with a catering service willing to work at a steep discount. A photographer friend agreed to document the evening in exchange for exposure to potential corporate clients. For weeks, I worked my regular marketing director duties during the day and planned the launch party at night. I personally created all promotional materials, press releases, and media kits. I compiled a guest list of influential industry figures and personally reached out to each one. I coordinated with tech publications to ensure coverage of the event. The night before the launch, I stayed awake until 3 in the morning, finalizing details and addressing last-minute emergencies. When my alarm went off at 6, I had slept less than 3 hours, but adrenaline pushed me forward. This was not just Jackson's moment. It was mine too. After years of sacrifice, I would finally see the fruits of my labor. I arrived at the venue 4 hours early to oversee setup. Every detail had to be perfect. This party would either secure our next round of funding or signal the beginning of the end. As I directed caterers and checked the presentation equipment for the 10th time, I allowed myself a moment of cautious optimism. Perhaps tonight would mark the beginning of a true partnership between Jackson and me, one where my contributions would be valued and acknowledged. Jackson arrived 45 minutes after the party had officially begun, making a dramatic entrance with a group of new investors and his girlfriend Alyssa, who I had met only once before. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly rent purchased with company funds for representation purposes. Alyssa was draped in a designer dress that probably cost even more. They moved through the crowd like celebrities, Jackson shaking hands and accepting congratulations while barely acknowledging my presence. When they finally made their way to where I was speaking with the venue manager, Jackson gave me a quick nod. "Everything looks acceptable," he said as if evaluating a stranger's work. "The investors seem impressed with the turnout." "I am glad," I replied, trying to ignore the sting of his casual dismissal of weeks of exhausting work. I was able to get representatives from Tech Monthly and Digital Innovator to attend. They are by the bar if you want to speak with them. Jackson nodded again and moved on without a word of thanks, but Alyssa lingered, eyeing my simple black dress with obvious disdain. "Couldn't you have worn something more impressive?" she asked, voice dripping with false concern. "First impressions are so important in this industry." I forced a smile. I was focused on making sure everything else was impressive. She shrugged and followed Jackson, leaving me to continue managing the event while trying to maintain a professional demeanor. As the evening progressed, I noticed increased excitement near the entrance. Martin Reeves, founder of Reeves Capital and the most influential tech investor in the city, had arrived unexpectedly. His firm was known for catapulting startups from obscure projects to household names, and he rarely attended launch events for companies as small as ours. Jackson immediately gravitated toward him, face flushed with nervous excitement. This was the potential whale investor every startup founder dreamed of hooking. I watched from across the room as Jackson began his pitch, recognizing the practiced words I had helped him refine over countless rehearsals. But something was wrong. Jackson was stumbling, losing his train of thought as Reeves asked pointed questions about our marketing strategy and user acquisition plans. These were areas I had developed extensively. Sections of the business plan Jackson had apparently not bothered to memorize, assuming charm alone would carry him through. I saw the moment panic flashed across my brother's face as Reeves frowned and began to turn away. Without thinking, I moved across the room and smoothly inserted myself into the conversation. "Mr. Reeves, I am Camille Barnes' marketing director," I said, extending my hand. "I could not help overhearing your question about our engagement strategy." Reeves turned to me with raised eyebrows, and I launched into a detailed explanation of our three-tiered approach to user acquisition and retention, complete with projected conversion rates and cost analysis. As I spoke, I could see Reeves's interest returning, his sharp eyes assessing me rather than Jackson. "That is the most concrete information I have heard all evening," he said when I finished. "You have clearly thought this through." "The entire executive team has contributed to our strategy," I replied diplomatically, though in truth the marketing plan was entirely my creation. "And what was your background before joining your brother's venture?" Reeves asked. "8 years in marketing with Danvers Agency, specializing in digital engagement for emerging brands," I answered. Reeves nodded appreciatively. "Impressive. I would be interested in seeing your complete projection models sometime. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting next week." "We would be delighted," I replied, trying to contain my excitement at having secured a follow-up meeting with Reeves Capital. As Reeves moved on to greet other attendees, Jackson grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a quiet corner of the venue. His face was flushed, but not with gratitude. "What the hell was that?" he hissed, fingers digging into my arm. "I saw you struggling with the marketing questions and thought I could help," I replied, confused by his anger. "He wants a meeting with us next week." Jackson's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You don't belong here. Stop trying to steal my spotlight." I stared at him in shock. "Steal your spotlight, Jackson. I was saving your pitch." He was walking away. "I had it under control," he snapped. "You are just the checkbook, Cam. The money behind the scenes. Nobody needs to know what you did. Stay in your lane and let me handle the investors." He released my arm and stalked away before I could respond, straightening his jacket and plastering on a charming smile as he approached another group of guests. I stood frozen in place, his words echoing in my head. "Just the checkbook. Stay in your lane. You don't belong here." After everything I had sacrificed, after emptying my bank accounts and maxing out my credit cards, after giving up dream jobs and putting my life on hold, after creating the very marketing strategy that had just impressed the biggest investor in the room, I was still just the checkbook to Jackson, a resource to be used and hidden away when no longer needed. The realization hit me with physical force, leaving me breathless and slightly dizzy. I needed space to think, to process this betrayal from the person for whom I had sacrificed everything. I made my way to the venue's restroom, locking myself in a stall as tears threatened to spill. Taking deep breaths, I pulled out my phone to distract myself, only to find a notification that nearly stopped my heart. Alert: large withdrawal from joint account. With shaking fingers, I opened my banking app to find our shared account. The one I had maintained for Jackson's expenses since he started college had been almost completely emptied that morning. A withdrawal of $27,000, leaving just enough to avoid overdraft fees. Money that was meant to cover next month's office rent and the upcoming payroll. As I stared at the screen in disbelief, an email notification appeared. It was a lease confirmation for a luxury apartment in the city's most exclusive high-rise, sent to Jackson, but copied to my email as the listed emergency contact. The monthly rent was triple what we had budgeted for housing expenses in our already strained company finances. Then came the final blow, a text message that clearly wasn't meant for me. Alyssa had apparently confused our names in her contacts, sending me a message intended for her friend. "Finally convinced Jay to get his own place without the sister baggage. Celebration drinks tomorrow. The company is taking off and we need to establish the right image without her dragging us down." I sat on the closed toilet lid, phone clutched in my hand, as the full picture came into focus. Jackson had not only dismissed my contributions publicly, but he was actively planning to push me aside now that he had secured initial investments. The joint account withdrawal, the new apartment. Alyssa's text all pointed to a calculated exit strategy that left me holding nothing but debt and broken promises. In that sterile bathroom stall, surrounded by the muffled sounds of the party, celebrating my brother's genius, I began to process just how completely I had been used. Every sacrifice flashed before my eyes: the tiny apartment I had lived in for years, the medical procedures I had postponed, the career opportunities I had declined, the relationships I had neglected, all to support Jackson's dreams. I had given him $178,412, 3 years of financial and emotional support, countless hours of unpaid professional work, all my industry connections and credibility, and in return I had received public dismissal and private betrayal. With trembling hands, I calculated the extent of my current financial situation. My savings were depleted. My retirement account had been borrowed against to provide Jackson's initial funding. My credit cards were approaching their limits. I had left a secure job with benefits to work for a startup that apparently planned to discard me at the first opportunity. I was, in a word, ruined. But as I contemplated this grim reality, another realization slowly dawned on me. While Jackson had taken my money and my labor, there was something he hadn't fully secured: the technical infrastructure of the business itself. In my role overseeing marketing, I had established all our digital accounts. The website hosting was under my personal credit card and account. The app development platform was registered through my work email from my previous job. All social media accounts had been created with my recovery phone number. The business email server was paid through my personal account. And most importantly, every crucial password was saved in my password manager, which Jackson had never bothered to ask about, assuming technical details were beneath him. For a moment, I sat perfectly still as I weighed the implications of this leverage. There was a part of me, the dutiful sister who had sacrificed everything for family, that recoiled at the thought of using this power. What would our parents think? Wasn't family supposed to be above everything else? But then I remembered Jackson's words, hissed with such contempt: "You don't belong here." After years of putting his needs before my own, he had made it abundantly clear that I was not family to him. I was merely a resource to be exploited and discarded. My phone buzzed with a call from my best friend Tara. I had invited her to the launch partly because I wanted friendly support, and partly because her company might become a client. I had been ignoring her texts all evening, too busy managing the event to respond. "Where are you hiding?" she asked when I answered. "I have been looking everywhere." "Bathroom," I replied, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "Are you okay? You sound off." I hesitated, then found myself telling her everything: the years of support, the public dismissal, the discovery of the emptied account and new apartment lease. "That ungrateful little shit," Tara said when I finished. "Camille, you have to stop this. What you are describing is not just bad family dynamics, it is financial abuse." "But he is my brother," I whispered, the old programming still running in my system. "I promised our parents I would take care of him." "Your parents would be horrified by how he's treating you," Tara replied firmly. "Taking care of someone does not mean letting them destroy you. And from what you have told me, he has no intention of ever acknowledging what you have done or paying you back." As Tara's words sank in, I remembered a session with my therapist months ago before I had left my job to join Jackson's company. She had warned me about one-sided relationships, about the danger of building my identity around being needed. "At some point," she had said gently, "you will need to ask yourself what you are getting from this relationship and whether it is enough to sustain you." Looking around the bathroom stall, hiding at an event I had organized to celebrate a company I had helped build, I finally had my answer. This relationship was not sustaining me. It was consuming me. "I need to go," I told Tara. "I will call you tomorrow." "Promise me you will put yourself first for once," she said before hanging up. As I exited the bathroom and rejoined the party, I felt strangely calm. The decision had been made. The only question now was how to execute it with the dignity Jackson had tried to strip from me. I moved through the remainder of the party like a ghost, mechanically performing my duties, while my mind worked through the logistics of what I needed to do. I collected my coat and bag from the venue's storage room, preparing for a quiet exit once I had ensured everything was running smoothly. As I made my way toward the door, Martin Reeves stepped into my path. "Leaving so soon, Ms. Barnes?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "Just stepping out for some air," I lied smoothly. "It has been quite an evening." Reeves nodded thoughtfully. "I was impressed with your marketing strategy. Very few startups at this stage have such a comprehensive approach. Thank you, I replied, surprised by his directness. I am curious, though, he continued. Your brother seemed quite thrown by basic questions about user acquisition. As the founder, shouldn't that be something he could discuss in detail? I hesitated, professional instinct telling me to protect the company image, while my newly awakened sense of self-preservation urged honesty. Before I could decide, Reeves continued. I make it my business to understand the actual dynamics of startups before investing. The public story is rarely the complete picture. He handed me his business card with his direct number handwritten on the back. I would still like that meeting next week, but perhaps we should speak alone first. I am interested in your professional assessment of the company's potential. I took the card, understanding the subtext of his request. Reeves had seen through Jackson's performance to the reality beneath. I would appreciate that opportunity, Mr. Reeves. Good, he nodded. And Ms. Barnes. In my experience, the people who build companies are not always the ones who take the credit for them. With that pointed observation, he moved back into the crowd, leaving me standing there with his card in my hand and a strange sense of validation warming my chest. I slipped out of the venue without saying goodbye to Jackson or anyone else. The night air was cool against my face as I walked to the subway station, my mind suddenly clear and focused. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and began the methodical process of reclaiming my digital life from Jackson's company. First, I changed the passwords to all business accounts, removing Jackson's access. Then I downloaded backup copies of all content I had created. The marketing plans, the pitch decks, the user research, the graphic designs, all representing hundreds of hours of my professional expertise. I accessed the website hosting account and transferred ownership to my personal email. I did the same with the app development platform, the social media accounts, and the business email server. Each digital asset that I had personally established and paid for was carefully documented and secured. Next, I called the bank's 24-hour service line and requested an immediate freeze on our joint account. Though Jackson had already withdrawn most of the funds, this would prevent any further automatic payments from processing. I removed the auto-pay settings for Jackson's expenses and canceled the credit cards to which he had access. Working methodically through the night, I compiled a comprehensive record of every dollar I had contributed to Jackson's education and business, scanning receipts and bank statements as documentation. The total was even higher than I had initially calculated: $185,927.14 over 3 years. By dawn, I had completed the technical portion of my exit strategy. All that remained was to communicate my decision. I crafted a carefully worded email to Jackson and the company's investors. It contained no emotional accusations or attacks, just a factual account of my extensive role in building the company, the financial support I had provided, and my decision to withdraw permission for the continued use of my work. To this, I attached documentation of all my contributions and a formal invoice for consulting services rendered over the past 3 years, calculated at a modest hourly rate far below industry standard. The total came to just under $90,000, less than half what I had actually spent supporting Jackson. I scheduled the email to deliver at 9 a.m. when I knew Jackson would be waking up, likely hungover from the previous night's celebration. Then I turned off my phone, took a sleeping pill, and fell into the first peaceful sleep I had experienced in years. My phone was vibrating off my nightstand when I finally woke at noon. 27 missed calls from Jackson, 15 text messages, and numerous notifications from social media. I ignored them all, making myself a cup of coffee and sitting by my window as I prepared for the storm. When I finally turned on my laptop, I saw the chaos unfolding. The company website was down due to non-payment, displaying only an account suspension notice. The app development platform had locked access to their tools when the ownership transfer triggered a terms of service review. All social media accounts required password resets, which could only be completed through my phone number. The business email server was sending bounce-back messages to all incoming mail. In short, the digital infrastructure of Jackson's company had collapsed overnight. 3 years of work, tens of thousands of dollars in investment, and the momentum from the launch party all stalled in an instant. Jackson's text messages escalated from confusion to panic to rage. What happened to the website? Why can't I access the development account? Call me immediately. Are you behind this? What the hell, Camille? The investors are freaking out. Fix this now. I swear to God, if you don't respond, I will sue you for everything you have. The last one made me laugh out loud. Everything I had already given him everything I had. There was nothing left to take. I turned my phone off again and spent the day taking care of myself for the first time in years. I took a long bath, ordered takeout from my favorite restaurant that I hadn't been able to afford in months, and watched mindless television without constantly checking email or worrying about Jackson's needs. The next morning, I kept my phone off and went to a coffee shop with my laptop checking my professional email account rather than my personal one. There was a message from Martin Reeves requesting confirmation of our meeting the following week, which I promptly accepted. There was also an unexpected email from a former colleague at Johnson & Marks, the company that had offered me the dream job in New York 2 years earlier. Heard you might be on the market again. The email read, "Our Chicago office is looking for a senior marketing director. Competitive salary, full benefits, immediate start possible. Interested." I stared at the screen, momentarily confused by this stroke of serendipity, before realizing that Tara must have reached out to her contacts on my behalf. I typed an enthusiastic response attaching my updated resume and suggesting interview times for the coming week. By day 3 of my digital detox from Jackson, I finally felt ready to deal with the fallout. I turned on my phone to find fewer messages than before suggesting Jackson had perhaps begun to accept the new reality. There was, however, a voicemail from an unfamiliar number that turned out to be from Alyssa. "Look, I don't know what happened between you and Jackson," her voice said, sounding far less confident than at the launch party. "But he is a mess. The investors are pulling out and we're about to lose the apartment deposit. Just call him, okay? This is destroying him." I deleted the message without response. Let her comfort him. Let her find out what happens when the money runs dry and the charming facade cracks. There was also a message from the company's junior developer, Tim, a talented programmer who I had always felt was undervalued by Jackson. "I don't know exactly what happened," he said, "but I want you to know that some of us understood how much you contributed. If you're starting something new, I would be interested in talking." I saved his number. A good developer was worth his weight in gold. When I finally called Tara that evening, she insisted on coming over with wine. "You need to celebrate your Independence Day," she declared as she arrived at my apartment. "It doesn't feel much like a celebration," I admitted as we settled on my small couch. "I'm essentially starting over at 32 with massive debt and a potentially damaged professional reputation." Tara shook her head firmly. "You're starting over without a leech draining your resources and energy. As for your reputation, from what I hear, most of the investors recognized Jackson as the front man, not the brains. That meeting with Reeves, that's your real launch party." She was right, I realized. For the first time in years, my resources, financial, emotional, professional, were mine alone to direct. The debt was substantial, but with proper financial planning and a good salary, it could be managed. The professional connections I had made were still valid, perhaps even strengthened by the display of my marketing strategy at the launch. 2 days later, I met with Martin Reeves at his office. I was nervous but determined to be completely honest about the situation. "I appreciate your candor," he said, after I had explained the full history of my involvement with Jackson's company and my subsequent actions. "It confirms my initial assessment." "Which was?" I asked. "That you were the actual talent behind the operation." He replied matter-of-factly. "Your brother has charm and can pitch a vision, but in my 30 years of investing, I have learned to identify who is actually building the product and making the strategy work." He leaned forward, folding his hands on his desk. "I am not interested in investing in your brother's company. I am, however, interested in potentially backing you in a new venture should you decide to start one. Your marketing approach to influencer brand partnerships was genuinely innovative." I left Reeves Capital with a tentative commitment for seed funding and a completely new perspective on my professional worth. The following day, I interviewed with Johnson & Marks and received an offer for the Chicago position with a salary that exceeded my highest previous earnings by 40% plus benefits and relocation assistance. As I began to rebuild my life piece by deliberate piece, there was a strange sense of lightness in my movements. The burden of constantly supporting Jackson, of organizing my life around his needs and ambitions, had been so constant that I had forgotten what it felt like to move freely. I found a lovely apartment in Chicago, accepted the job with Johnson and Marks, and began sessions with a financial advisor to create a debt repayment plan. My credit score would take years to recover, but each payment felt like reclaiming another small piece of my independence. 6 months after the launch party disaster, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Jackson, new phone. Can we meet, please?" My first instinct was to ignore it, but after consultation with my new therapist, I agreed to a brief coffee meeting during my next trip to visit Tara. The Jackson who met me at the downtown cafe was almost unrecognizable from the confident, borderline arrogant entrepreneur of 6 months earlier. His designer clothes had been replaced with a simple button-down shirt and jeans. The expensive watch was gone. He looked tired, humbled. "Thank you for meeting me," he said quietly as we sat with our drinks. "What do you want, Jackson?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I had rehearsed this conversation many times in therapy, determined not to fall back into old patterns. "I wanted to apologize," he said, staring into his coffee. "I treated you horribly. I took advantage of your generosity and then dismissed your contributions. I was selfish and ungrateful." "Yes, you were," I agreed simply. He looked up, perhaps surprised by my direct acknowledgement. "After everything fell apart, I had to face some hard truths about myself and what I did to you. I have been seeing a therapist trying to understand why I behaved that way. And I realized I was terrified of being seen as dependent or weak. After Mom and Dad died, I couldn't handle the fact that I needed help. So I created this narrative where your support was either temporary or insignificant, where my success was entirely my own achievement." He paused, swallowing hard. "It was easier than admitting how much I relied on you, how much I owed you." I nodded, recognizing the pattern. "What are you doing now?" "I got a regular coding job at a tech company," he said with a small, self-deprecating smile. "Entry level. It actually feels good to earn a real paycheck to pay my own rent on a small apartment I can actually afford." And the startup? Gone. The investors pulled out when they realized how much of the infrastructure was compromised. Some of them were pretty angry, but when they understood the full story, most of them directed their anger at me, not you. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 years of dysfunctional dynamics hanging between us. Finally, Jackson spoke again. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Cam. I wouldn't forgive me either. But I want you to know that I am working on becoming someone worthy of being your brother again. I've started setting aside money each month toward paying you back, even though I know it will take years." I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I had missed for so long. But all I saw was genuine remorse and a humility that the old Jackson had never possessed. "I don't need your money, Jackson," I said. "What I needed was your respect and acknowledgement. What I needed was to be treated like family, not an ATM or a ghostwriter." "I know that now," he said softly. "Too late, but I know." I didn't offer immediate forgiveness. That would have been dishonest and premature. But I did leave the door open a crack. "I'm building a new life now," I told him. "If you want any place in it, it will be on entirely new terms. Equal respect, honest communication, and absolute transparency." "I would like that chance," he said. "Whatever terms you set." As I walked away from that cafe, I felt no triumph in Jackson's downfall, no vindication in his suffering. What I felt instead was a quiet certainty that I had finally done the right thing, not just for myself, but for him too. By pulling the plug on our dysfunctional dynamic, I had forced us both to confront uncomfortable truths and begin the process of building healthier lives. 1 year after the launch party, my life had transformed completely. My new position at Johnson and Marks had already led to a promotion. I had made significant progress on my debt repayment. My apartment in Chicago felt like a real home, decorated with care and filled with new friends. I had even started dating again, cautiously exploring a connection with someone who valued my professional accomplishments and respected my boundaries. Jackson and I maintained limited contact, occasional text messages, and monthly video calls that were cordial if not yet completely comfortable. He remained committed to his personal growth, continuing therapy, and building a legitimate career from the ground up. The relationship was still fragile, but it was based on mutual respect rather than exploitation, which was all I had asked for. Martin Reeves kept his word about potential investment. I had begun developing my own marketing consultation firm as a side business with his seed funding and mentorship. Several of my Chicago clients had already signed on, impressed with my innovative approaches to digital engagement. Looking back on that night when Jackson whispered, "You don't belong here," I now recognize it as the moment of truth I had needed for years. He was right, though, not in the way he intended. I didn't belong in the shadow of someone who couldn't value my contributions. I didn't belong in a relationship that took everything and gave nothing in return. I didn't belong in a life built entirely around someone else's dreams and needs. Sometimes belonging means having the courage to walk away. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to pull the plug on a dynamic that's draining everyone's potential. And sometimes from the ashes of what you let burn, something healthier and more beautiful can grow. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away from someone you loved for your own well-being? Let me know in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Share with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself sometimes. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve to be valued, not just needed.